J-Mart, we did a lot of college football in hour 1. We'll get back to it in hour 3, but there was a huge topic that we wanted to get to, but that Texas A&M game just went on and on and on in a good way. It was a great game. That is the state of Arch Manning. So Texas beats UTEP 27-10. By the way, this week, weird stuff. J-Mart, I'm sure you saw the Sark media availability where there was a video of Arch wincing. They asked him about it, and I'm paraphrasing. We don't need to play the sound, but in paraphrasing, he said, "Do I follow you into the bathroom and see what face you make?" And it was weird, and it was defensive, but it was also, reflective maybe of what we saw on Saturday. Arch Manning, 11 of 25 passing, 114 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And by the way, Texas fans actually booed him coming off the field at one point during that game. I got takes, but I'm curious. What's going on with Arch Manning? Let's just talk it out. Let's talk it out. Go ahead.
He's still trying to figure things out. He was 11 of 25 against UTEP for 114 yards. Had a touchdown and a pick. He ran for 2. They won the game. They're 2-1. It's a top 10 football team. But I think the biggest problem for Arch Manning is how he looked against Ohio State for 3 quarters negates anything that he's done in the past 2 weeks because of the opposition. And in fact, when you look at those stats and then you see it's UTEP, you're like, oh, wait, what's going on here? I said to you I was not willing to go too deep on Arch being, complete trash or anything like that, right? But I also said that he may be, I may unconsciously be giving him the benefit of the doubt because of his last name.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this were Arch Smith, I'm not sure I would, if he had been hyped to this degree, which he probably wouldn't have because his name would have been Arch Smith. But if he was Arch Smith, I'd probably be saying Texas probably needs to find somebody else. This guy doesn't look like he's got it. He's very young. We know this. He's still trying to figure it out. I think the biggest thing that I look at right now is I say, this dude is a project, not a product. He is very much they're still trying to figure out what he is. He's still trying to figure everything out as a quarterback on this level. But I do think that it is very much fair at this point to say it was too much too soon. And he does become a victim now of, if you watch that Ohio State game, and I was watching in a hotel room many miles away from home the week that I missed, and Arnie was in with you, but I couldn't help but notice how many commercials he was in, how many commercials his famous relatives were in, and then they would come back to the live game and he was bad.
Yep.
The one problem with the NIL era is that we are paying guys who haven't done anything yet. We are paying guys, we're putting guys out there based on potential and nothing that they've actually accomplished that would give you trust in that. And that means that it's going to be much fairer game to be much harsher on the critique of those players. And Arch Manning is a perfect example of that because he was everywhere in those ads, and then on the football field he was nowhere because he just couldn't get anything done. Luckily he had that fourth quarter, but last week he had the 4 touchdowns in 5 minutes, and everybody attempted to try and make that into more than it was. And then in this game, he just didn't look good against a team he probably needed to, because this is a team that you would expect him to go in and dominate. And even if you look at the stats and say, well, the stats don't always tell the story. Right, it might have actually been worse. At one point, I think he was 5 of 16 throwing the football. He had thrown a really bad interception. He just, right now, it does not look right in any way, shape, or form. That's why you're like, oh, he was wincing. Why? Again, because he's a Manning, right? And we've heard about him for 3 years at least, maybe even longer. Something's got to be wrong with him, because we couldn't have been this wrong. The hype couldn't have been this off base, except maybe it was.
Yeah, and so I agree with everything. I tried to be fair, and I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt in the in the preseason. But I still go back to the most basic point, which I'm sorry, people say it's a casual take, but I disagree. If he was that good, they would have played him last year. Quinn Ewers was not a guy that Steve Sarkisian trusted. All you had to do was watch the games. They would get up, and then they would just try to basically play like, run the clock for the rest of the game, defense and run game, okay? So that's one. But two, here's the other thing, is that, I think it's just an interesting conversation, too, about Texas as well. Because all of a sudden you look at that schedule, Arch versus John Mateer, advantage John Mateer.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. And admittedly, there are 21 other starters on the field. Arch versus Diego Pavia. I mean, I'd take Diego Pavia. Now, admittedly, I would take Texas's defense, wide receivers, running backs, O-line. It might not matter. But like right now, based on a quarter of the season, we do have a quarter of the season in the books for these teams. I'd take Diego Pavia. I'd take Gunnar Stockton. I'll tell you this. I don't think they'll win. I'd take Taylon Green, who I just saw awesome tonight for Arkansas against Ole Miss. I'd take Marcel Reed, who just led a game-winning drive with 2 minutes to go for Texas A&M. So, you go on and on down the list. And I think we talked about it a little bit last week of well, now if Arch isn't good, how does this game look and how does that game look? And you just start, building up sample size is not the right word, but you just start looking at the schedule and all of a sudden, unless Arch is hurt, if he's not, I don't mean this sarcastically or to be mean-spirited, I kind of hope he's hurt. Because
exactly.
You know what I mean? Because if he's not hurt, I don't think he's the better.
Bad.
Yeah, I don't think he's the better quarterback when they play Vandy against Diego Pavia. I don't think he's the better quarterback when they play Arkansas against Taylon Green. I don't think he's the better quarterback when they play Texas A&M with Marcel Reed. So, are they going to win some of those games because there is talent across the board in other places? Yeah, but all of a sudden, it's so funny because we talked last hour about Notre Dame. It's going to be hard to build a resume for the playoff. Clemson, it's going to be hard to build a resume for the playoff, even only in week 2. I'm not saying we're there yet with Texas, but all of a sudden games that everybody, and I include myself, I'm sure you would feel the same, that you just kind of said, well, Texas is going to win that one. Well, Texas is going to win that one. Even 2-3 weeks ago, all of a sudden you can't say that about a lot of these games that are on this schedule.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, it was 14-10 at half. Or sorry, it was 14. It was 14-3 at the half, but it was never out of reach. It felt like I don't think anybody thought UTEP was going to win the game, but it should have been a blowout.
That's crazy.
It just should have been a blowout with due respect to whatever the vaunted program at UTEP is. But this is Arch Manning, and this is not how this is supposed to be, right? This is not what we were told we were going to see all year. This is not what we all assumed we were probably going to see all year. Your point in saying, it's kind of an old take that he would have started last year if he were ready, if he were good, because Quinn Ewers we had seen kind of what Quinn Ewers was, and we felt like that's probably not going to be good enough to win a championship, and it turned out it was not. But Sark didn't go there. And he would have, I think, if Arch had given him the best chance to win. I think maybe last year we might have thought differently, but looking back, hindsight's always 20/20. You recognize now that no, Sark was doing the thing that gave him the best chance to win. The problem for Arch is this. A lot of times, somebody that's a young quarterback is going to get time to develop, and there's going to be patience there. There's going to be some growing pains, but you're going to see some progress. They're going to get better and better. They're going to be there by the time they're a senior. Look out. That's just not how college athletics works anymore, and it's definitely not how college football works, especially in the NIL era and the win now era. And with the money being involved, these boosters are going to find money to bring somebody else in there if they feel like, next year they could win a championship with a different quarterback. So you look at all of that. Arch doesn't have time to be mediocre. Arch doesn't have time to be at Texas and be subpar. Arch has to at least be pretty good now to get the benefit of the doubt and to get people to give him time. I think that his name is like I said, for me, it unconsciously, I'm not ready to cut bait on Arch Manning yet, but there's a lot that needs to be shown. He's going to have a lot that he's going to have to prove through the remainder of this year for people to still buy in at the end. But I think at some point the Manning name is actually going to flip, and maybe it has for some other people. And it's just like, well, if he didn't have that name, he would be regarded as absolutely nothing at this point, and no one would have any trust in his development and what he was going to be able to grow into and all of these other various factors that stand there. So it's a tough spot for him to be in because, again, this dude tweeted 3 times in 5 years. He wasn't putting himself out there. And, of course, companies came to him and wanted his likeness and wanted him to advertise, their products and all those kinds of things. But now, when he goes out there, when he tries to advertise himself as a quarterback, he doesn't look like he's ready for the college game, and we shouldn't even be discussing what would happen after the college game because he certainly doesn't look like he could do that right now.
Yeah, last little put a bow on on this thought. I don't know how you felt about all of these guys, and this isn't really an arch topic, but it sort of is an arch topic. Didn't really understand this could be a generational quarterback class conversation for the NFL draft perspective.
Yeah.
All I'll say, Cade Klubnik plummeting down draft boards. Arch Manning, I would say essentially non-draftable. Lenora Sellers got hurt today. We'll give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt.
Carson Beck.
Dude, I'll say this.
He's playing. He's balling out at Miami.
Carson Beck looks awesome. I'm not enough of an expert to know how John Mateer looks as a draft prospect, but he's playing. But I mean, we might still get 4 or 5 first rounders. It might just not be the guys we thought. But I was thinking about that today as it pertains to Arch Manning and Cade Klubnik specifically. Is that this class? And then yes, I won't ramble. But to your point, I think the better question might be: is he the starter at Texas next year? Not is he going to be, a starter in the NFL next year?
Not if there's not some progress.
Yeah.
Not if we don't see a decent amount of progress going forward and relatively soon. I don't see a universe where he is back because there's too much money at Texas and too much pressure on someone like Steve Sarkisian. They don't have the time to sit around and hope that Arch Manning develops. Even if they cut bait and he goes and is great somewhere else, it's Texas. They'll be able to find another quarterback that's going to be able to win football games for them. I just can't see them risking another season on him if he doesn't show a tremendous amount of development going forward.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I know every scenario is a little bit different, but in his recruiting class 2 years ago, Jackson Arnold, 5-star, can't miss, goes to Oklahoma. He missed. And Brent Venables was like, you got to get the heck out of here. I got to figure this thing out or I'm going to lose my job.
And guess what? He has.
Yeah. No, he has. And by the way, Jackson Arnold, it's early, but he's actually playing pretty well. But
he's doing all right.
The only point I'm trying to make, by the way, Jackson Arnold, the return game to Oklahoma next week, so that'll be fun. But the only point I'm trying to make is that kid was can't miss. He was out. Nico also in that class. That was a little bit of a different situation because he was playing pretty well at Tennessee. And, let's just say Nico's dad ain't up for Father of the Year pretty much anyway.